The 2023 NFL season has officially come to a close, as the Chiefs beat the 49ers in exhilarating fashion to win Super Bowl 58. Meanwhile, the Seahawks made a splash by signing former University of Washington offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb to act as new coach Mike Macdonald's first OC. The Ringer's Steven Ruiz joins us to break it all down. Let's light him up. I'm Jackson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts. Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jackson Bevins, and along with my debonair producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Mike, how are we doing today?
Jackson, how do you think we're doing today?
You're feeling good, buddy.
Yeah, things are good, man. We got to watch, honestly, objectively, the first half of the Super Bowl was defensive battle, not a whole lot of scoring. Things were looking a little bleak.
Yeah.
But strong finish, my friend. Strong finish. Legendary performances in the Super Bowl. And it was a rematch, you know. There was bad blood between these teams from a matchup years prior, and similarly came down to the wire. In fact, it was an even crazier game than the last one. That was hell of a crazy game. So I have no complaints. How are you feeling after
I'm good,
a raucous
man.
end of the season?
Yeah. You know, I'm good. It's funny, you know, I always say, I'm a football fan first and a Seahawks fan second. And as a football fan, that's exactly what I wanted from the Super Bowl. I really felt like I was watching two teams. Both were deserving of winning that game. But at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes he's inevitable, man. It's death, taxes, and Patrick Mahomes. And to see what he did down the stretch, third, fourth quarters, and overtime, it's just amazing. Like, was there any doubt in your mind after the 49ers got a field goal in that first possession overtime that the Chiefs weren't going to win? Which is crazy because I think, like, objectively, that field goal gave the 49ers like a 65% win probability. And it felt like a 15% win probability knowing that Mahomes was getting the ball back. The
moment that I think I knew that the Chiefs were going to win the Super Bowl was when the 49ers did not convert that 3rd and 4 on
the zero blitz from Steve Spagnuolo.
Yep. Trent McDuffie, Husky legend, making a play. I mean, and he made a lot of plays on Sunday, but
he might have been the real MVP of that game.
He was unreal. Spags was unreal. And if they get that first down, they can run the clock down, kick a field goal, win the game. But as soon as they don't pick it up and they elect to kick, and even though they hit that field goal, it just seemed like a foregone conclusion that the game, honestly, I thought that the Chiefs were going to win it in regulation. When the ball was hanging in the air, when Pat threw that fade to Kelsey with Warner on him in the end zone, it was looking like it for a second, but it was a game deserving of overtime, and we got a hell of a finish.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that overtime. This is the first time we got to see the new overtime rules that and the NFL put in place just for the postseason. And it was a direct response to one of the greatest, most fun playoff games we've ever seen a few years ago between the Chiefs and the Bills, where there were like 4 touchdowns scored in the final 2 minutes. And then, the Chiefs went down, scored a touchdown in overtime, and that was that. And it's just like, we were all feeling like, man, just give the Bills the ball back. Let Josh Allen answer. And so what we had was a totally different paradigm for strategy. And I don't hate that when the 49ers won the coin toss, they elected to get the ball first, because there's two kinds of schools of thought here. One, if you take the ball first, then, you get a chance to go down and score, put pressure on. But the bigger thing is if you're tied after those opening 2 possessions, it becomes sudden death. And now you've got the advantage because you're getting the ball first in the sudden death period. On the other side of the ball, if you get it second, you know exactly what you need to do. And you no longer have 3 downs to get a first. You have 4 downs to get a first. And we saw that, right? Normally I don't know that the Chiefs are going for it deep in their own territory on 4th and 1, but they had to, and they converted and then ended up scoring. what really blows me away is the 49ers admissions afterwards that they didn't really have a plan and they didn't really understand. And to me, it was just kind of a continuation of a team that didn't seem focused on the right things leading up to this game. There was a lot of talk about, from Nick Bosa about how the Chiefs hold all the time, and him and McCaffrey and a few others complaining about the fire alarm pole, which I love that.
The 6 a.m. fire alarm pole, that really. But also,
you're getting up. Yeah, you're all getting up like 30 minutes later. Yeah. Like, get over it. But there was so much of that. There was Shanahan looking like he was coming off of, it was like the final scene of The Hangover when he was at media day. And I was just like, man, where are these guys' heads at? So to me, it's interesting. I think, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy. He's the head of ESPN's analytics, and he modeled out, I think he did 10,000 simulations with the new overtime rules. And he actually said that the team that gets the ball first won 50.2% of the time. So, the process wasn't bad to me. It's just funny to me that they didn't have a plan. You could almost see it from Fred Warner when they won it. He was like, we'll take the ball.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't have a problem with the decision to take the ball first, as long as you're operating with the knowledge of who is standing on the opposite sideline.
That's exactly it, man.
Right? Like, the problem wasn't that they took the ball first. And honestly, I guess it looked pretty dicey there for a second on that first set of downs, because they basically went 3 and out, and you had that holding call that extended the drive. And then, of course, after the drive extending holding call, you automatically move 60 yards downfield. That's how those penalties go.
It is, man.
But you get 6 yards on first down in the red zone, and then on 2nd and 4, you run the ball again, and you get stopped. And so you have 3rd and 4, and Spags once again dips into the zero blitz.
Unbelievable,
and gets
man.
Immediate pressure. Chris Jones right in Brock Purdy's face, and he sails the pass to probably.
That's the kind of shit
Super
that
Bowl
MVP
MVP
you buried if it doesn't work.
Yeah, completely. That's live or die by the sword. But that's the stuff that Steve Spagnuolo can afford to do when he knows who his quarterback is, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, in that situation on 4th and 4, hindsight's 20/20, but in that moment, objectively, are you going for it on 4th down there, or are you kicking the field goal?
I'm going for it. A field goal does not win me that game. I feel like kicking a field goal, you can answer to your fans there and say, look, we took the points, whatever. You're playing for a goddamn Super Bowl, man. Like, this is it. You're Kyle Shanahan. This is legacy on the line. You know how much work it takes to be in that position. You've got an offense that has been basically breaking all the efficiency barriers all season long. And I don't want to overstate it, because Brock Purdy has become too much of a lightning rod. But if you really believe that Brock Purdy is an elite quarterback, you're going for it on 4th and 4. You just are, knowing that Mahomes is on the other side.
Yep.
And if you don't get it, then you hope your defense holds them. But 3 points wasn't going to do it. We all knew that. Even when the kick went through, we all knew 3 points wasn't going to be enough.
Yep. I feel for Steve Wilkes, because the performance that he put together through the first 9 or 10 drives of that Super Bowl, holding the Chiefs to 6 points deep into the third quarter, is crazy. And the reason the Chiefs get their first touchdown on the board is because of a punt that bounces off of one of the return blockers' feet.
I know.
And then, of course, and that's the other thing, as soon as you recover not a true muff, but a muffed punt, a touchdown is automatic. Like, that's just the way that the universe works in its machinations. But
and the universe was working as 49ers. I mean, the Dre Greenlaw injury, that's the one.
That should have been the moment we knew that God did not want that team to win the Super Bowl.
For real, man. Like, if I'm a 49ers fan, and it was just, it's one thing. Look, you have someone roll up on you. That's football. You get hit with a block. That's football. You're making a tackle. That's football. You just get too excited to rush off of the sidelines and try and catch yourself, and the turf monster grabs you.
Yeah,
that is brutal, and that's going to affect them going into next season. I mean, you literally can't have an injury later in a season than that one. And I spent the next 20 minutes, I was just feeling for Dre Greenlaw, because he was the best player on the field up until that point. It reminded me of the dominance of Cliff Averill in Super Bowl 49. The right tackle for the Patriots could not block Cliff Averill, and he was having like a career-defining game, and they got concussed. And Brady and the Patriots found their groove after that. They just had more time. That's what it felt like for me in this game, because, I mean, Drake Greenlaw's responsibility in that game was Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce had 1 catch for 1 yard on the first play of the game and nothing else. And after he went out, Patrick Mahomes completed every single pass to Kelce until that last one at the end of regulation with Fred Warner covering him. And that's where the game switched. So it's the little things like that. And again, it reinforces why if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm not trusting my defense in overtime. It's if I have Greenlaw, the calculus is different. He's that important of a player. So yeah, super fascinating game. I mean, that's the beauty of a good Super Bowl, is that there are 10 different individual things you can point to and say, if that had gone different, we have a different game. So that was awesome. I thought it was just the perfect climax to a really fascinating season.
Plus,
and then
a generational day to be a hater. Just an unbelievable day to be a hater.
Just a great day for the haters out there.
Fantastic.
Mike, those are your people, man. You just celebrating with your people.
We are riding, baby. It was great.
Well, and back home, a couple days beforehand, we had, the offensive coordinator search playing out in real time. I know you and I had been texting each other all week, getting excited about Ryan Grubb, just because we saw him engineer, granted with great talent around him, but engineer the best offense in college football and for the Washington Huskies. And then he goes in front of the boosters at Alabama and reaffirms that he's their offensive coordinator, but he hadn't signed his contract yet.
Still sitting on the desk.
And then I get a text from Seattle Cigar Concierge, who is super dialed to the UW program, like incredibly closely tied to the UW program. And he texts me, he's like, hey, just so you know, Grubb's not off the board. And I'm like, bullshit, whatever. He just went in front of all of Crimson Tide Nation and said that he's going to be the offense coordinator. He's like, no, I just had coffee with the athletic director. Trust me, he's in play. I was like, no shit. And then sure enough, we start seeing the blurry snapshots from Dino's Diner next to the VMAC showing that, that Ryan Grubb is having dinner with John Schneider and Mike Macdonald. And at first I was like, yeah, that's just 3 guys that kind of look like them. But then more and more pictures started coming in. Hour later, Bob Condotta, shout out to Bob coming on the show last week. He's saying they're expecting to make it official in the morning. I mean, what an incredible few hours that was.
As somebody who has deleted my fair share of beers at Dino's, I can say that they are not imbibing those drinks without some good news ahead. Those are some celebratory, we're all making a lot of money together drinks. Mm-hmm. But I mean, look, as you said it, he coordinated the most, explosive, dynamic offense in college football this past year with Michael Penix, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk. Even though there were a lot of air raid concepts built into the passing game, they had a 1,000-yard rusher in Dylan Johnson. But the thing that gets me most excited about Ryan Grubb is the fact that at each stop along the way, when he was at Sioux Falls with Kalen DeBoer, even when he was at Eastern Michigan without him, and then back at Fresno State with DeBoer and in Washington with DeBoer, their offense didn't look the same. It tailored the scheme to the personnel that they had, which is something that Mike Macdonald has spoken to a lot about the way that he's going to design Seattle's defense based on the players and personnel that they have here already and the guys that they'll obviously bring in. There's a bevy of moves in the works. I'm sure this team's going to look different than it did this past season. But the other part about Grubb that excites me is the fact that he was an O-line guy. He's been an O-line coach every step of the way. Mm-hmm. The only team out of the past, his recent stops since Sioux Falls, that he hasn't been the nominal O-line coach was at Washington when he was the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, and assistant head coach. But his background is at the offensive line, and he also managed to pry away Scott Huff, who is Washington's longtime offensive line coach, who made the trek over with him and DeBoer to Alabama. Who knows if any of this translates to the NFL? Who knows if Mike Macdonald's going to translate? But as we said about the Macdonald hire, I think all of this is inspiring. And the fact that your play callers on both sides of the ball are Ryan Grubb and Mike Macdonald, that's exciting shit, man. That's like chaos demon time ball.
It is. Well, what have we been saying all along, man? We want eggplant emoji hires, and that's what we got.
Exactly right.
We don't know if it's going to end up working or not. It's way too early to say. But like Mike Macdonald, eggplant. Ryan Grubb, eggplant. Like this is what we want, man. Like this is if you're going to move on from a legend, you got to do it by taking big swings, and they did that. Kudos to Jody Allen. Kudos to John Schneider. This is a transitional time for this franchise, and they are not just sitting back on their haunches and letting it come to them. They went out and got their guys.
They did. And the fact that Mike Macdonald is the one who designed, obviously Jesse Minter made some tweaks, but laid the foundation for the defense that absolutely dismantled Washington's offense in the national championship game. Iron sharpens iron, and, those two guys are going to, help each other be better on a daily basis. And, like I said, who knows how it's going to actualize at the next level, but it's going to be exciting if nothing else.
You said it, man. I mean, exciting is the word. And it's wild that another year has come and gone, and it all sets up for a fascinating offseason. We'll get into all of it with our guest. But first, if you're listening or watching us right now, it's hopefully because you like the show. And if you like the show, there are a few ways you can support it. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, take a couple of seconds to leave us a 5-star rating. And if you're feeling super supportive, a quick review as well. You can do that right now. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll find full video episodes, entertaining clips, and the audio reads of every Cigar Thoughts article. This is probably the best way to help the show grow, and growth is going to enable us to bring more of our football discourse your way, so we're grateful for the few seconds it takes to like and subscribe. And as always, you can get your official Cigar Thoughts cigars at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Mike, I gotta say, after a bit of a clunky start, we talked about it at the top. The Super Bowl delivered once again. The Chiefs erased a 10-point first-half deficit to win in overtime, walking it off with the Patrick Mahomes touchdown pass on the final play. It's the latest in a string of late-season heartbreaks for the 49ers, and it clears the decks for the 2024 offseason. Part of that story will be the debut of head coach Mike Macdonald, who hired some coordinators since our last show, like we just talked about, including the hometown favorite Ryan Grubb. Sitting down with us to chop it all up is one of my favorite people covering the NFL. He writes about the league for The Ringer, is a host on the Ringer NFL show, and created the QB ranking system that I'm sure no one ever disagrees with. He is Steven Ruiz. Steven, thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
I love the intro. And it's true. It's true. Nobody has ever disagreed with us.
The only unanimously agreed upon quarterback rankings
Crazy.
in history.
Everyone says the internet is bad. I don't see it. I don't see that part of it. I don't know.
No, it's funny though, because and we'll talk about this more later in the show, but they are my favorite ones. Even when I disagree, the way that you lay out why you have them ranked the way that they are, instead of just like, hey, here's my, I uploaded the tiers template and here's where I'm putting everybody, like is real good shit, man. And I'm excited to talk with you about that. But dude, you were in Vegas for the Super Bowl, and I was there for the first weekend of March Madness last year, and it was pretty wild. I can't imagine what the Strip was like this past week.
Oh man, it was insane. The traffic was insane. Getting anywhere, even like 2 minutes down the street, took at least like 30 minutes. I stayed in my hotel. I learned my lesson after like Thursday or Friday. I just stayed in my hotel for the weekend and did not see the sunlight after that. That's what that city will do to you after a couple days. You don't need to see sunlight.
Right. Right. Yeah. When I was there, I didn't leave the Caesars Sportsbook for 4 days. So I'm one of those plants that doesn't need the sunlight if there's sports on. But I do want to talk with you about the game itself. It took a little while for the teams to get going with some uncharacteristic mistakes on both sides early. But the final 2 quarters and overtime delivered everything that I look for in a title game. And there is so much that we could talk about, but what are some of the things that stood out to you the most?
I found the 49ers offense versus the Chiefs defense to be the most fascinating part of the game, especially being at the game. You get a different perspective. There's like some drawbacks to being at the game because you kind of miss out on the conversation that the commentators are having and ultimately the people on Twitter are having. but you really get to see like the whole field, and it's like live all 22, and you get to kind of see the chess match unfold. And in this one, I thought it was really interesting how the Chiefs kind of balanced being super aggressive on early downs against the run while not giving up the big play, and it was cool to see that from the wide angle.
Yeah, well, and that was kind of the thing, if I was a Chiefs fan, the thing that had me the most worried is, could they stop the 49ers on the ground? And is Kyle Shanahan going to be disciplined enough to continue to run the football? Because he's come out pretty pass heavy in those games against the Packers and the Lions and has found himself in real trouble as a result. And man, I shudder to think what this game could have become if McCaffrey didn't fumble on that opening possession.
Yeah. I think their first 6 plays before that were positive EPA. Like, they were just rolling. They were ahead of the chains. And then that play happens. It kind of disrupts their drive. And then the second drive, then they had a penalty on Trent Williams. Might have been back-to-back penalties, and that killed that drive. Yep. Those little mistakes, those are the margins when you're playing Patrick Mahomes. You can't afford to make those mistakes. 49ers haven't made them a bunch this year. They ran into that this week. And I really think that's what lost them the game. Those 2 first drives, not cashing in with 7 points, because they were on the front foot in the game. Yeah. And I thought Spags kind of caught up quickly, which tends to happen with like the best defensive coordinators, is like, you can have those first 2 drives, you can have the script, but once we like catch on to what you're doing, it's over. Kind of like Mike Macdonald, new Seahawks coach, against the Chiefs. The first 2 drives, the Chiefs march down the field and score, and then, but like at the game, you can kind of see how hard it was for the Chiefs to score on the Ravens those first 2 drives. And I turned to my buddy Danny Heifetz, who I work with at the Ringer. I was like, I think like they're done scoring at this point. And like they were done scoring. They only scored 3 points after that. I think that's the mark of a great defensive coordinator. The Seahawks got one now, but I think the Chiefs have one on their hands with Spags. And the most fascinating part of like the chess match to me was, I think it was how Spags kind of put the game on Purdy, like mentally. And I'm not saying that to kind of take a shot at Purdy at all. I'll do that later. Don't worry about that. But that system, like, it's really based on like the check with me system. Like, we're going to go to the line, we're going to read the defense, we're going to see the front, and then the quarterback's going to decide which one of 2 plays that were called in the huddle that they're going to run. And that's based on like the front the defense is in, the defensive line. And I thought the Chiefs did a good job of presenting one front before the snap and then kind of stemming into another front after the snap. Like, you could see it on the first couple of plays where they're lined up in like what looks like a 4-3. And then like Jones stunts inside, the defensive end stunts inside. And like, if you pause it like a second after the snap, it looks like a 3-4 defense. Right. It looks like a 3-4 front. And that kind of disrupts like the run concepts they're getting into, because Purdy's not getting into the ideal play call. And when you're not getting into that, you're kind of getting the lesser version of the Shanahan offense.
Well, and it helps when you have L'Jarius Sneed and
McDuffie. When you have those corners that can hold up on the outside.
I mean, that's the thing, because the thing that was so incredible to me watching the Chiefs defense this year, and just really getting a chance to watch them closer in the playoffs because there's no other games going on, is how versatile their pass rush looks are. I think I read somewhere that they had 20 blitzes against the Ravens and none of them were identical. And that is so difficult to do, but a lot easier to do when you have 2 corners that you can say, look, we're just going to play man. I mean, no one's playing man in the NFL anymore. And the 49ers, they've got the tightest offensive splits from outside guy to outside guy that the league has seen in a few years, which in theory should make it even tougher to play man defense because it's easier to run picks and things of that nature. The Chiefs didn't care. They really put this game on their corners, didn't they?
Yeah, and I asked Snead after the game, I said, was that like the game plan going in? Did you know? Did the corners know going in that it was going to be that type of game? We're going to be on an island and they're going to be blitzing the hell out of the line of scrimmage. And he said, yeah, like that was the idea. That was the game plan. We wanted to put it on Purdy. We wanted to make him beat us with his arm. And I mean, they were in position to do it, but ultimately they couldn't. But I really thought that was the game was won and lost on first and second down. When you saw that the Chiefs could win those downs, that was the game. And I think when you look back at the 49ers losses this year, that was the recurring theme. Like, for instance, you look at the Seahawks games against the 49ers, they couldn't get wins on first and second down and made third down so much easier. And then on the flip side, on the other side of the ball, the Seahawks couldn't win on first and second down. And we saw that just made life hell on Geno Smith.
Right.
When the one game he played him.
Yeah. And it's interesting. We mentioned Purdy earlier, and of course we want to talk about Mahomes here in a second, but with Brock Purdy, I thought that we saw Brock Purdy in this game. He had 2 or 3 really nice throws in this game. It's not like he's not capable of doing that. But when there is pressure up the middle, it is really difficult for him not to overthrow those passes. And he had some overthrows in big moments. And I'm not saying these are like layup throws that he should have made. I mean, it was tight coverage. It was pressure in your face. But if you want to beat the Kings, you got to make those throws.
Right. We didn't set this bar, right? We didn't set the bar this high.
Right.
If anything, I set the bar very low.
Did you see from Brock Purdy what you expected to see? Did he outplay expectations, underplay expectations?
I think in certain regards, he outplayed expectations, like avoiding sacks and managing pressure. I thought he did a really good job. I don't know if some of those balls into coverage would have been caught by the Chiefs defense if I would have said that he did a good job managing pressure, but I do think taking only 1 sack, considering the fact that they had 9 unblocked pressures, is it's a green flag for the quarterback. That's a thumbs up for him. But throwing the football, I thought it was a rough look, like all game long. Even some of the throws that he did complete, like I'm thinking of the sail route to Conley, I thought was late. I thought it was in the air forever, and I thought it limited his yak potential. He had a couple digs where, that's just the throws that get made in the Shanahan offense. I'm not impressed by them anymore. Like, I've seen Tua make them, I've seen Jimmy make them, but he did make them. But it's kind of hard to watch some of those overthrows on the guys wide open running for touchdowns and not think of that 3rd and 10 or whatever it was that Jimmy missed against the Chiefs in the last Super Bowl. It's hard not to have those memories.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, look, I can't imagine what is going through Kyle Shanahan's head after that game. I mean, he's done, this is his 3rd Super Bowl now, if you count his time as OC in Atlanta, and double-digit leads in all of them. And at some point, it's just gotta feel like the most Sisyphean freaking pursuit.
That's what I compared it to.
Did you?
That's what I compared it to on Sunday. Yeah.
Totally.
When I said instead of
you get the rock to the top of the hill, man.
Yeah, but instead of pushing a boulder up for eternity, he's just drawing up play action concepts that work for eternity, and only for his guy to miss it once he gets to the top of the hill.
Well, let's talk about this. I mean, windows are short in the NFL. I still think the 49ers, and they've got some big contract decisions to make here, but they got 1 more year pretty on the cheap. How close to this window being closed without, them really retooling this roster do you think it is? Or is there still another couple of years where you expect 49ers to be right there?
I think, if all things being equal, if we could turn injury sliders off, for instance, like you turn the injury setting off in Madden, then I would say they would have at least 1 more year left. And I mean a legitimate, wide open title window. I'm not saying they can't be on the fringes of that. But what are the chances of Christian McCaffrey staying this healthy again for 20 games? Yeah. A player that we've never seen stay healthy for this long. A player that...
Well, he only gets 400 touches, though.
That's right. He barely comes off the field. I mean, the guy plays 99% of the snaps. That's a question that I think they're going to have to ask themselves in this offseason is are we going to have to change this? Because I don't know if he's going to make it through another year. I think they're going to have to protect him in the same way that I thought the Chiefs did a really good job of protecting Travis Kelce throughout this year, because he dealt with some injuries early on. But he was barely playing on first down. He ran a route on 66% of their first down snaps. Yeah. Which is just insane when you're thinking about the best player on the team outside of Mahomes. And I think the 49ers might have to do that, which I guess would be hard because you're kind of not giving yourself the best chance to win during the regular season. But that's not what this is about at this point. You are a team. We don't want to see another NFC title appearance. We don't want to see another Super Bowl loss. For the 49ers, they need a Super Bowl to validate
for yourself.
Thing. Oh, well, yeah. No, I'm with you guys. I might be more invested in this than Seahawks fan at this point. But,
yeah. Well, I mean, it's so tough, right? And this is something I wrote about a lot in the 2015, 2016 season with the Seahawks is you get to a point where the expectations, when you're an NFL fan, they change so rapidly. When Pete Carroll was first hired, we're just man, can we get back to the playoffs, please? And then they do as a 7-9 team, and we're just yeah, and then fast forward 5 years and they're 11-5 and losing the second round of the playoffs. And it's like, this is a disaster. Tear it all
you guys
down.
are so bitter.
Exactly.
Have you seen Bills fans lately?
Oh my gosh, dude.
You remember when they made the playoffs because Andy Dalton made that throw and they were like, they were 7-9, they were going to get killed in the playoffs anyway, and it was like they started donating millions of dollars to charity, and now like they go 11-5 and they want to jump off a bridge.
I know it, and so it's kind of nice. Like as a Seahawks fan, we get a chance to reset our expectations a little bit, but flipping to the other side of this game, you've got the Chiefs, and I'm far from the first person to make this parallel with Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid. It's easy to forget that Andy Reid went to 4 consecutive NFC championship games as head coach of the Eagles, made the Super Bowl twice, lost both of them. And he was the guy who couldn't get it done. He was the coach that couldn't get him over the hump. He eventually loses his job, has this rebirth in Kansas City. How much of him going from being the most accomplished also-ran since Marv Levy to now being like unmistakable Hall of Fame, potential Mount Rushmore type quarterback. How much of that is an evolution from Andy Reid, and how much of it is he just got Patrick Mahomes and kept doing his thing?
I think it's 100%. He just got Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the answer. He still makes the same mistakes. We see it all the time. He made some mistakes in this game, and they still won. He's made mistakes, like clock management mistakes throughout the playoffs. It hasn't mattered, and it's because he has this margin for error that nobody else enjoys. And I think it's until Kyle gets one of these quarterbacks, like he is perfectly fine and he's perfectly good enough to win one with these quarterbacks. He's been close enough where we could say that. He almost won with Brock Purdy. He almost won with Jimmy. But in order to like leave no doubt, you don't want to leave it to the judges. Like that's the term in boxing. You got to get one of these quarterbacks, because when you leave it to the judges, like this stuff tends to happen more often than not when the other team has a superstar quarterback.
Yeah, no kidding. And I mean, I wasn't old enough to appreciate Joe Montana's prime, but I imagine that he felt inevitable. And then Tom Brady felt inevitable. And you just wonder, I remember saying, like, going into the Super Bowl 49, Russell Wilson had this incredible 2-year start to his career where, he had that great rookie season and then won the Super Bowl in year 2, got him back to the Super Bowl in year 3. And I think Brady had 4 rings at that time, or maybe
he had 3.
He just had the 3, right? Yeah. And so you're like, okay,
that was the drought.
And I remember, that's right. You're right. And I remember thinking like, okay, if the Seahawks win this one, all of a sudden I'm like projecting, could Russ catch Brady? And then of course the Patriots win that game. And my just sort of like evolution, I think as a sports fan, I can point to this as an evolutionary moment for me to just let go of like personal allegiances and appreciate greatness, was the 28-3 game against Atlanta, where I was just like, man, I'm going to spend the rest of my life being frustrated by this guy, or I can just be like, this is great. This is awesome. We're seeing the greatest ever. And I thought by the time you'd done that, forget the 2 Super Bowls that came after it. By the time you had done that, I was like, oh, we're just never going to see anyone approach this level. And here we are, 6 years into Patrick Mahomes' career. I mean,
it's worse.
It is, man. It totally is.
Brady was a game manager the first time he won a Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Patrick Mahomes threw like fucking 50 touchdowns. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but 50 touchdowns.
Oh, you are.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is just, it's so insane. It's like, Brady had these 2 dominant chapters. He had the first one coming up where, Bill Belichick, whose dad literally wrote the book on defense in the NFL, dominating that side of the ball, and Brady doing enough to help those teams win, to all of a sudden, his second run of titles were these high-flying offenses. He's setting records. He's doing all of these things. We're seeing that second chapter of Brady's career in the first chapter of Mahomes.
Yeah, he skipped the boring prologue. He just got to the good stuff right away. Totally. And like even when Brady started doing that, when he started putting up the numbers like in 2007, that's when they stopped winning. Mm-hmm. And it kind of took a few years. It wasn't until the Seattle Super Bowl where they really got back on track in terms of winning Super Bowls again. But like I had that same moment, and it was the Seattle Super Bowl for me, like with Brady, where I'd like, I got to stop hating this guy. I just got to appreciate what I'm seeing. But that's just because I hated the Seahawks more at that time. Sure. I was a Panthers fan. earlier in the
that was a good rivalry,
postseason.
early 2010s.
Yeah, it really was. And I think that was the year they beat them in the playoffs when Cam got the pick six.
Yep.
Cam Chancellor. Bobby Wagner like jumped over the line and blocked an extra point, I think 2 plays in a row.
Yep.
That game made me just despise the Seahawks so much. So that's what, like, yeah, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I was like, oh, for this Brady guy, he's all right.
Totally. I mean, look, we're going to talk QB rankings, like I said, a little bit later on. We're not going to spend a lot of time on Mahomes when we get there, but he's obviously your number one. You've got a pretty close margin between him and Lamar. Is there at this point, knowing what he's done, and I don't know how much you weight what they've done in previous seasons when you update these, but is it possible for someone to overtake Patrick Mahomes in the next year or two, almost regardless of what happens in your rankings?
I don't think so. Those aren't up. We haven't updated them since the postseason started. I'm going to do that next week, but yeah, I don't think anyone's close. I never really considered moving him from number one throughout the season. I write a little intro every week, and there was a time when I wrote like 200 words on why I think he's even better than he was in his MVP season. And I can't see it because in order for someone to close ground on him, he's going to have to stop improving, and we haven't seen that happen yet.
God, how crazy
he's gotten
is
better
that?
every single year, and like the margin he's getting better is bigger than the margins everyone else is getting better. He's improving at a faster pace than everybody else. So I don't know. It's like he like adds a new thing to his game every offseason. Like, oh, I need to be a check down guy this year. That was last year, and he does that and he wins MVP. He's like, oh, I got to start scrambling because we're going to see a lot of man coverage because our receivers can't separate. They can't catch the ball. Then he becomes the best scrambler in the league this year. He's always done it well, but he's done it more often this year. And
he was the leading rusher in the Super Bowl.
Right. I mean, next year it's going to be like, he's going to be like, oh, they're really taking away the right side of the field. I'm just going to become a left-handed quarterback now. Throw left-handed. Like, I don't know what's next. They're going to be bad on offense. He's just going to become the greatest punter of all time. He's going to win with field position. He does whatever he needs to do. And I know it's easy to say this, but like, if I'm a team that's like on the margins of like whether to keep a quarterback, and this could be a good segue into some Geno talk, but it's hard to see that dude and think we're going to be able to beat him without like a perfect team around him. And we saw what happened. I would say like there's a wide gap between Purdy and like a top 10 quarterback like Geno in terms of skill set. But if the 49ers couldn't beat him, like who can beat him? If the Ravens couldn't beat him, who can beat him?
I was going to say, I mean, you want to talk about as close to a perfect team. If you're a believer in DVOA, I mean, the Ravens are the best team the NFL's seen in a long time and had the MVP at quarterback, and it didn't matter.
We've talked about this, but it feels like every single season the Chiefs have just turned the difficulty slider up and up and up.
Right.
Like last
getting
season.
bored.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we need to make this shit interesting somehow. But like they trade away Tyreek Hill. They win the Super Bowl. This year, the leading receivers in the Super Bowl were Mecole Hardman and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Like, what are you supposed to do at that point? And also, can I just say,
you called
that
it.
Somehow,
you called it.
Some way, when we were setting up this episode, we were getting in touch with Steven. I just said, hey, let's just touch base after the Mecole Hardman legacy game. I just want to apologize for not sending you any gambling tips while you were still in Vegas. Jackson, if you want anything before March Madness starts up this year, just hit me up. You got my...
Yeah.
Have your people contact my people.
Yeah,
What did you know? Yeah. That's some inside information.
Raj
Seriously.
leaked the script early.
It's just... No, I mean, I feel like next year they're just going to play 10 guys on offense and see if they can do it that way. Because you're right. I mean, it is Justin Watson and Mecole Hardman winning this game, as far as the receivers go. And I mean, Kelsey had 1 catch for 1 yard in the first half. He was great in the second half. And it was really funny to see, the Chiefs had 2 goal line plays to win it. They had the one at the end of regulation before kicking the field goal. And then of course the game winner in overtime. And both times you could just see the 49ers like, no matter what happens, it's not going to be Kelsey that beats us. And they tried on the first one, but it was really, really cool to see when they ran that corn dog play. Basically won them the Super Bowl last year. They ran it again to win it this year. Watching Kelsey run his route, knowing Charvarius Ward was put in a position where he had to choose which receiver, he stays with Kelsey because, of course, you got to in that situation. Kelsey doesn't even watch the throw. He's just looking at the jumbotron with his hands in the air the second he saw Ward shade inside. It was really awesome.
Yeah, it was fun to watch. It was fun to watch Kelsey go up against Fred Warner all game. Like that was the 49ers plan to stop Kelsey, and it was a great one-on-one battle. Kelsey won the one, like he had the drag route when he ran away. He ran 19 miles per hour.
Oh my gosh!
The first time in 7 years, apparently. But that one play, the fade, the one you referred to, that was just like great football.
Yes.
Like Patrick Mahomes throwing to Travis Kelsey with Fred Warner in man coverage, and he makes the play. Just
the three best players
man.
on the field, just like with the Super Bowl on the line. Yeah, it was awesome, man. And now, I mean, look, we put a bow on this season. The script writers did a hell of a job this year. Very, very compelling season. And now, big questions for most of the teams. And the Seahawks are entering a new era for the first time in 15 years. And, we've got Mike Macdonald. You mentioned him as being one of the best defensive minds in the NFL. I thought he and Steve Spagnuolo were the two best assistant coaches in the NFL this year. We're going to find out how he can run a program. When you heard that the Seahawks hired Mike Macdonald, what was your first reaction?
Good. Like I want to see the Seahawks succeed. I like Geno Smith. I like Mike Macdonald a lot. Like I've covered the Ravens a fair amount. I'm on the national beat, but I'm around Baltimore, so I get out to practice whenever I can. Went to both the playoff games this year. But everything you hear from people who work with him is that it's not just like the X's and O's and play calling, which I think tends to get overrated with coaching hires, just because I don't think it moves the needle that much. But the thing with him is like teaching it and teaching it to players, teaching it to coaches, like empowering the assistant coaches to lead meetings and all that stuff, the administrative stuff. He's really good at, and the stuff that should translate to being a head coach. I always say like it's impossible to judge these hires, but like based on what we've seen work for other coaches, I think he has those goods, and I'm really excited to see it. Now, he is a quiet guy. I will say that he's a quiet dude. He's reserved. I think he's a smart guy, and I think he knows how smart he is. So it's always interesting to see how that works. When you're the DC, I think that plays a little bit better. But if you're the head coach, you have to deal with people who are not like benefiting from your play calling. Like if I'm the cornerback, the second cornerback, and I'm having my best year because of this guy, I'm not going to get mad when he yells at me. If I'm the tight end and he does nothing for me in terms of like play calling, like if he yells at me, I'm like, all right, like fuck this guy,
Yeah.
So he's not a yeller at all. I'm just like generally speaking, that's what I mean.
Of course.
But yeah, so you never know with that stuff. But like X's and O's football, teaching the coaches and that side of it, I think he has that down pat. Now it comes down to buy-in, motivation, and staying fresh and staying a step ahead, which I think is like the thing that he does well in terms of play calling. He's been on the cutting edge since he's gotten to the NFL, and even before that at Michigan. I don't think you have anything to worry about there. I know I saw some Seahawks fans freaking out about the run first comments he made, but that's how defensive coaches think. That's how you have to think about football. If you don't think about football in that way, your defense is going to stink. And so I'm not concerned about that at all.
Well, and that brings us to the most recent move, which, and this is funny. One of my favorite accounts on Twitter, which is Seattle Teacher Burner, was talking about the TMZ era of Seahawks fans, where Mike Macdonald and John Schneider were spotted at Dino's little kind of like diner near the practice facility at a table with Ryan Grubb, like the night before it became official they were hiring him. And all of a sudden Twitter's filled with all these like secret cell phone snaps of them sitting at a table and looked like they were like drawing on napkins and stuff.
I have to say, like seeing Seattle Twitter or Seahawks Twitter go through a coaching search has been everything I expected.
Oh,
like
gosh.
They haven't hired a coach for what, 15 years or whatever.
Right.
I don't know how long it's been.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen it in the era of deranged Seahawks Twitter.
What?
And it's been everything I expected.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say, as far as McDonald goes, I mean, I'm somewhat in a bubble here, but I really do try and keep a 30,000 foot perspective on the league. I'm trying to remember the last head coaching hire that got this close to 100% approval rating as Mike Macdonald is getting right now.
Yeah, and maybe that's a red flag because
maybe.
We don't know shit about head coaching, so maybe it's a bad thing. But I really don't think it is. I think he's a smart guy and he's going to figure it out. And the Grubb hiring, like I don't know much about him. I don't watch a lot of Pac-12 football. But if Mike Macdonald likes him, I was really interested to see what direction he went in terms of OC, just because he's never hired an OC before, and right. I think it says about what he thinks about modern offense. I don't know, like for instance, Sean McVay hiring Brandon Staley kind of was like, oh, kind of validates him because that's what's tough against his offense, and his offense is what matters in this league right now. I would say the same thing about Mike Macdonald's defense, and the fact that he picked him, I think, is a good sign for him. And didn't they play Michigan? I don't know if they played Michigan this year or the year before, but they played him, and he wasn't there, but I'm sure he had guys on his staff that could tell him and vouch for the OC and the play calling in that game, and it must have been good.
Yeah. I mean, and along those same lines, in the opening press conference for Mike Macdonald, John Schneider, the GM, kept talking about how they walked out of that 37-3 loss against Baltimore, basically saying, like, I want that. Like we had no answers. Like this guy whipped our ass in a way that, the Seahawks haven't lost by 34. I couldn't tell you when. Maybe that Rams game, 5-6 years ago, and then never before that with Pete Carroll there. And it was just like, okay, there is a clear delta between where we're at and what this guy is doing. We're going to wait as long as it takes for his team to lose in the playoffs or win the Super Bowl, but we're waiting on this guy. And that was really cool. As far as Grubb goes, it's interesting because I saw today a graph that it was x-axis was pass frequency and y-axis was average depth of target. And at the top right corner was UW. So not only was Ryan Grubb passing a lot, but he was really pushing the ball downfield. Now, I think I'm not sure what kind of quarterback Michael Penix will be in the NFL, and you may have some thoughts on that. I know that you will develop further thoughts on that through this pre-draft process, but say what you want about him. He throws the ball to the third level as well as anybody in the country. And the question now becomes, because I think Geno has shown that he can do that, question becomes, do they stay that aggressive? Because at UW, you had one of the best offensive lines. You had the best receiving core. I mean, you got probably a top 10 pick flanked by two receivers that'll probably be day 2 picks and Michael Penix. So, it'll be curious to see, do they push it as much in the pros as he did in college? Because I think there's some very similar skill sets in Seattle.
Yeah, I think that's what it's going to come down to. I'm basing this off of like the type of defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald is. He's going to put his guys in spots that he knows they can handle. He's going to play the type of defense he knows his guys can handle. I'm assuming Grubb has a similar philosophy. And the reason why he was like so adamant about throwing deep was because of what you said. He had prospects. He had a quarterback who was an NFL prospect, an offensive line that could hold up, a receiver who's going to be a top 5, top 10 pick. I think he plays to his strengths. That's what it seems like. And if he does that, I don't know if it's going to be as like gung-ho about throwing downfield, because in the NFL that's hard to do. But I think it's going to be a part of his philosophy, especially with, like you said, those pieces they have. Question is, do they have the offensive line to hold up? They haven't had that for the last 2 years. And that's going to be interesting to see how he works around that, assuming it's a problem again next year. And that's the thing about coordinators. I think that's the main job with coordinators is we get so wrapped up in like play calling rates and like pass rates and stuff like that. I think it comes down to mitigating your weaknesses and kind of exploiting the other team's weaknesses. And the best coordinators do that no matter what their personnel is. And sometimes it looks different. Sometimes it's a high run rate on first down. Sometimes it's a low run rate on first down. But it comes down to what pieces you have. And I think the best coaches understand that it's about players and not plays.
Yeah. Well, and if I'm Ryan Grubb and I have my choice, not that he necessarily did, but if I had my choice of NFL jobs, Seattle is really attractive. And there's a couple of reasons for it. One, I mean, you have this institutional stability that most teams that are hiring new coaches don't have. Most teams that are reloading their coaching staff didn't just win 9 games twice in a row. But, I text daily with one of your coworkers, Danny Kelly, and he's kind of the king of pre-draft comps, and he texted me. He was like, I'm struggling with Michael Penix. Who does he remind you of? And I said, he reminds me of Geno Smith if he wasn't a knucklehead coming out of college, because it's the same ability where mobile enough. They're not going to run for 600 yards in the league, but they're mobile enough to evade pressure, pick up a third down on a scramble, and throw on the run. But it's that ability to put the ball where it needs to be in the second and third level that I think really separates good NFL quarterbacks from the rest. Penix can do that. Smith can do that. I think there's a fair amount of crossover between Odunze and DK Metcalf. There's some things to like here.
Yeah, and I think the reason to be excited is because you have a quarterback. I'm not going to overhype Geno. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. I think he's a fringe top 10 quarterback when everybody's healthy in the league, when Herbert, Burrow, Rodgers is healthy. But he is a quarterback with a diverse skill set, like you mentioned. He's not great at everything, but he's good at everything, is how I would put it. He's not a scrambler, but he can scramble. We don't talk about him in the same terms we talk about Josh Allen's arm, Mahomes' arm, Stafford's arm, but he's got a very strong arm compared to the league average quarterback. He's not Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow in the pocket, but he navigates the pocket well. He's not Dak Prescott in terms of processing, but he processes in the 90th percentile. And when you have a quarterback like that, there's no limit on what you can run on offense. You don't have to run a drop back or a play action under center offense with him because he can process. You don't have to run a dink and dunk offense because he can push the ball downfield and he's not afraid to test a tight window, and he's capable of doing it. So I don't think he puts any limitations on the offense, or he won't put any limitations on what Grubb can do. I think it's the offensive line, and that's the big question, and that's going to dictate what this offense looks like.
Yeah,
it's going to dictate the play calling on first and second down. It's going to dictate how well they are able to handle third and long, because that has been an issue in the past 2 years.
Big time.
But I think that's really the key to this, and I think Grubb, if he's good, is just going to find whichever method works, whichever method fits their personnel. But I think Geno is the part of it that kind of makes whatever style they want to go with possible.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this. Now, with the caveat, like you said earlier, you haven't updated these rankings since the postseason started, but unfortunately, Geno Smith didn't play any postseason games, so no new data there. But in your last iteration, you had Geno Smith number 8 out of all the quarterbacks in the NFL. Talk to me about what led you to place him there, and do you feel like he's still roughly in the same area moving into next season?
Yeah. What I would say, it's the things that I care about most with quarterback play is managing pressure and then being able to make those 90th percentile throws, those throws downfield, those throws into tight windows, the outbreaking throws if they're playing inside leverage, which we've seen guys like Tua and Purdy, even when they're playing inside, they're going to still throw that dig route over the middle no matter what, because Kyle and Mike said it would be open, so I'm going to throw it no matter what. But you need a guy that can process that stuff, make the throws, and do it while handling pressure in the pocket without making plays worse than they need to be. Obviously Russ was a top 5 quarterback when he was at his peak, but he was a weird quarterback.
Yes.
And he made things tougher on his offensive line. Yeah, it was a tough evaluation. It was tough to kind of contextualize his performance in the pocket with that offensive line. And obviously the offensive line was bad, which made things even harder. But I think Geno doesn't really do that. I think he's going to get the most out of your pass protection, whereas Russ is going to make your pass protection look worse than it is. And then he has a big arm. If you have those two things, I think you can get an elite offense out of that as long as you have the right pieces around him. And I don't think the pieces have to be that great. I'm not saying you need the 49ers supporting cast. You don't need the Eagles offensive line. If you could just give Geno a decent offensive line with these weapons that they already have, and then Grubb's a decent coordinator, I think he can give you an offense that's capable of getting to a Super Bowl.
Wow.
Obviously, you need a defense that can match that. You need a championship defense. And like I said, you need Grubb to be good. You need the offensive line to be good. And that's kind of the thing with him is he's a good quarterback, but he needs these things to be a great quarterback or to produce a great offense. Whereas Patrick Mahomes, you give him Mecole Hardman and it's fine. He's going to create a Hardman legacy game. Yeah,
game
right.
changer.
Sorry. I didn't mean to offend. You give him a bum like Travis Kelce, and he's going to make him look good. He's going to get him Taylor Swift.
Totally. Totally.
But yeah, Geno needs some support, but he doesn't need Brock Purdy level support,
So let me ask you this. If you're John Schneider and you're trying to game plan these next 2 to 3 years, because I think as fans, we tend to assume windows are much bigger than they actually are. I mean, we just see the landscape shift so dramatically every single year. So I think the best GMs are looking in 2 to 3 year windows when they're making their decision. And nature of NFL contracts, that's just kind of the reality anyway. If you're John Schneider, where are you at with Geno Smith? Is he your guy moving forward? Or are you like, you know what? He's good, but we should probably get the next guy in place as soon as possible?
I'm at where Andy Reid and the Chiefs front office probably felt, or where they were at in like 2016 with Alex Smith, where it's like, all right, we got like a fringe top 10 quarterback. He's good enough. I think Geno's better than Alex Smith was back then. I think he's a different type of quarterback who allows you to do more things, but like similar ranking territory. They're looking for the guy, but they're not like going out of their way to get rid of the guy that they have. I think it's how you have to do it. And if a situation pops up where like, hey, and this is tough. This is a tough comparison because I think like Geno is closer to Matt Stafford than he is Jared Goff. But like you get a chance to get a Super Bowl level quarterback, like a guy that could play like Matthew Stafford, or a guy that could play like who would be available? I don't even know. Like Trevor Lawrence comes available. The Jaguars lose their mind. They don't sign him, and he becomes available. Then yeah, you move on from Geno. But right now, I think it's tough to like expect to draft a quarterback unless you have one of those top 2 picks. Like if you're getting a guy like Penix, who is, I think, a decent prospect. I think he's an NFL prospect for sure, but he's not like a guy you're trading up for instance. I think you let a guy like that fall to you rather than going up and getting your guy when you have someone as good as Geno Smith. But I don't think having Geno Smith should prevent you from drafting a guy if you're in that position.
So, I mean, let's assume, I think in at least 99 of 100 simulations, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, barring some craziness, are well off the board by the time you get to 16. Is there anybody else in this class that if you're the Seahawks, you say, yeah, we got needs elsewhere, but this is our chance to get to the other side of the Geno Smith bridge? Is there someone there at 16, Penix, McCarthy, Nix, someone else that you would be strongly considering?
I haven't watched those other guys. I've seen them play live, but no, I think the chances of them being better than what Geno is right now are very long. I think a lot has to go right in their development for that to happen. Jaden Daniels, I've started watching him last night. I've watched like maybe 2 games. I can't get over how skinny he is.
Yeah.
And I know those things are dumb. I know it's like, oh, you can't just look at a guy and judge a book by its cover. But like, you look through the history of the NFL, and you kind of can.
Yeah.
And he's very thin. And I watched the Florida State game last night. And one of the plays, he scrambled into like a massive humanity. It was like a lot of traffic. It might have been an RPO. It might have been a quarterback draw. But there was a pile of defensive linemen and linebackers. And this guy
I know the play you're talking about.
And got
airborne Sparta kick into the scrum of humans. Yeah,
and got caught midair and slammed to the ground. I'm like, do you know how much you weigh? Like, you can't do that. And people were like, you're writing off Bryce Young last year because of his height and his weight, but he looks small.
Yeah.
And I think when you go to the NFL, you tend to look small when you are a small guy. So, like, I would take Geno over him long term. Drake May and Caleb Williams, yes, I would trade Geno right now. I would buy a first-class ticket out of town to get one of those two and replace him. But I think that's where I draw the line in this class.
Okay.
But that could change.
Okay. So set at quarterback. You look at, the rest of this team and how it lines up. What are you prioritizing? Knowing that, you've got an opportunity to potentially free up some money. Right now, the Seahawks are kind of up against their cap limit. But we know how fungible that is this time of year. You've got your pre-June 1st cuts, your post-June 1st cuts. Are you looking to move on from a guy like Tyler Lockett or a Quandre Diggs or a Jamal Adams? Or is it like, hey, these are kind of the guys that I want to, first of all, with the safeties, I want to see what they can do with Macdonald. And Lockett, he's still a very good receiver, even though this is a bit of a down year. Let's push it forward one more year and then start looking at the reset after that.
I think with the defensive guys, the safeties, like you said, I would want to wait and see. And I just think like no matter what they choose, it's probably the right thing because I trust Mike Macdonald's judgment. Like I think he knows what he needs to operate his defense. Offense, I wouldn't give him that benefit of the doubt. Like defense, I'm just gonna be like, I'm gonna let you do your thing, whatever you do. Yeah. I trust you. Offensively, I would keep Lockett. I don't think they've had the offensive line to really maximize Lockett, but I think he's the best receiver on the team, honestly. And I think he's I think he's a top 20 receiver in the league when he's healthy, when he's playing. We just haven't seen his skill set maximized yet. I'm a real big fan of teams that go into an offseason and they're like, I don't care. We're going to improve this position group no matter what. We're going to throw every resource we have at it. We're going to use draft picks. We're going to use cap space and free agency. And I think if they do that with the interior of their line and they've really solidified that offensive line and build something good, I think this offense could be really, really, really good. What were they, like 10th in offensive or pass game EPA?
Yep.
With an offensive line that was a problem for the most part. I would really like to see this passing game with a top half of the league offensive line.
Yeah, and
I think that's attainable. That's attainable in one offseason.
I think so too. I mean, this is an offensive line heavy draft. I'm hesitant to just draft for need. I think as fans, we tend to say, okay, what were we bad at? Let's go draft that. And you end up sometimes reaching for subpar talent, especially with a first round pick, right? I mean, there are contract implications with a first rounder that you don't have with all of your other picks in terms of the 5th year option, the 4th year being guaranteed, and just what their salary is going to be slotted as. It's funny. I mentioned Danny earlier. I was texting with him and Mina earlier today, and we were talking about the potential that Brock Bowers falls to 16. And so we were playing out like, do you go get Brock Bowers because you see him as the top 5, top 10 talent in this draft? Or do you say like, yeah, another weapon would be awesome, but we don't pick again until the 3rd round. Like,
I think with him, you take him.
Yeah. And that's kind of where we ended up. Like, if you really believe that he is a top tier talent, and I think that he probably is, you draft him and you figure out the rest later.
Yeah, I haven't watched him either, but like from what I've heard and what I've seen from people that I do trust that have watched him, like he's a needle moving talent. I think you don't pass on those guys. Like you said, to draft for need. When we've seen those off seasons kind of work, like the just point a fire hose at it just until you fix it. I think it's when teams approach the draft with like a trade back mentality. Like, yeah, we're not going to reach for an offensive lineman, but we're going to trade back until we want to draft one that we like in a spot that we like. And then you're also picking up, draft capital along the way. But if you're in a position to draft like a guy like that, like a guy that I think changes the nature of an offense, then you take him. Yeah. And I think he could help out the offensive line just by his presence on the field, just being a tight end, being in those spots, the type of stuff you could do with him, the type of plays you can run, like play action and all that, the run game, then I think you take him.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Seahawks famously passed on George Kittle to draft Will Dissly, and I see a lot of Kittle in Brock Bowers' game because it does. And I don't want to spend too much time on this hypothetical that is unlikely to happen, but right. A player like that, I'm glad you mentioned that he could help the offensive line because he is a true two-way tight end. This isn't Mike Gesicki where it's like, yeah, you're technically a tight end because, you're a 6'6" white guy. It's like you are a true tight end who can do everything.
He's not cosplaying as a tight end.
Exactly.
He's not a receiver cosplaying.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, something like that is interesting. Obviously, we'll talk a lot more as we get closer to the draft about, drafting for need versus best player available. But on the other side of the ball, and this is more of a statement than a question, but I would love your thoughts on this. I have a type when it comes to players. Of course, we all love the players on our favorite team that are really good. Like, how can you not? But I really, really tend to the guys that wake up on game day ready to fight. Like, just ready to go fight people. And I never thought that there would be another player in this chapter of Seahawks football that would approach my love for DK Metcalf for those reasons. Like, it's one thing to be bigger and faster and all of that stuff, but DK Metcalf shows up looking to fight, and I love that. Devin Witherspoon, man. Devin Witherspoon in Mike Macdonald's defense. Like, I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how he uses them. It's interesting because of like where you want a guy like that. Like he's one of those, like, you could put him in the slot and he's basically like has the linebacker mentality, even though he
A little bit of Buda Baker
like,
to him that way.
He's like Jaden Daniels doing the hurdle into the thing, but it's in a good way, complimentary. It's not derogatory when I'm talking about a quarterback. But no, you want your nickel to do that.
Yeah.
But he had Kyle Hamilton kind of playing that role at times, so it's going to be kind of interesting. He also had Brandon Stevens, so there is a type of model where you have the cornerback body there instead of the safety body. But I really want to see how he uses them, and like I think that's what makes the safety discussion so interesting, because to get the most out of a safety in 2024, I think he has to be able to play in the slot. And if you have a guy that you are comfortable and you want to play there, like I think Witherspoon is like, that's his ideal position in nickel sets, is just getting closer to the action, being around the ball, being able to utilize his feistiness, his physicality, his want to fight, as you put it. I think that's the way to get the best out of him. But I do think it makes the safeties a little expendable in that way. So it will be interesting, and I think like how they kind of reshape the roster during the offseason will give us a clue as to how he's going to use these players.
Well, and it was really interesting, to your point, to hear Mike Macdonald in that opening press conference. He was asked, like, are you bringing your system over from Baltimore? Are you going to run the Baltimore defense? He said, I don't know. I got to figure out what we're good at first. And that I loved, because it's really cool when you have a coordinator come in that has this scheme that really set the league on edge, and Mike Macdonald have it. And I'm thinking about like a Shanahan. I'm thinking of McVay on the offensive side. You know, these guys where it's just like, oh, I want that. But that only takes so far. Like the
Brandon Staley, for instance. I think that's the
Brandon Staley
example. Everyone wanted that, and then the Chargers got it, and it didn't work.
Yeah, and I know that Brandon Staley is Mike's favorite head coach, so I don't want to besmirch him
Cream
too
of the
much.
crop, baby.
Mike fucking hates Brandon Staley. But it's like, you know, it's one of those things where the scheme is great, but can he counterpunch, right? And that was something that I think was a bit of frustration for me with Shane Waldron. I think Shane Waldron's opening scripts were awesome, and it's reflected in the numbers. They were top 5 offense in the first 20 plays of every single game, and then bottom 5 the rest of the way.
Right.
And it's like, okay, can you counterpunch? And we don't know if Macdonald can do that yet, but to hear him talk about it, not as like, hey, I've got this system and I'm going to force my players into doing these things. It's, I'm going to see what I got first, and then I'm going to build a system based on that.
I mean, you watch that. You said we haven't seen it yet. I disagree. I think we have seen it. I think you watch the Ravens the last 2 years, and you watch them week to week. They're a shape-shifting defense. They're a game.
Okay, talk to us about that. I haven't watched the Ravens this close.
They react to what the defense does better, and I think it's evidenced by the fact that they never got this year. Like even like Staley, there were times when they got. Like that 2020 season when he had the Rams, when he had Aaron Donald, he had Jalen Ramsey, and they were the number 1 defense. They played the Bills. The Bills put like 35 on them. They played the Packers in the playoffs. I think the Packers put 35 on them. That never happened with the Ravens. Even when they lost, Patrick Mahomes scored 3 points in the second half. When do you ever see that from Patrick Mahomes? They play the 49ers with a totally different type of offense.
They pulled them apart.
Pulled them apart. They did it to the Seahawks. They did it to the Lions. They did it to every like hot young offensive coordinator. They just put them in a blender. They just put them in the contraption, and it was over from there.
Weirdly, the only team that really got to them this season was the Rams and McVay and Stafford.
Yeah,
it was because Stafford was like throwing these like Avengers type balls, like passing 30 yards downfield. And the thing about that is, in the second half, that dried up real quick. Like the Rams got them in the first half, no doubt, but in the second half, and I think that game went into overtime, they didn't really get a lot. So I think there's your example of him counterpunching within the game. But there are plenty of examples of him having to plan B, having the left hand week to week.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Is can you do that? And Mike Macdonald appears to be able to do that. Now, can he do that while he's still handling all of the responsibilities of being a head coach? Because like I'm fond of saying, It's not just the X's and O's on Sundays when you're head coach. You are the de facto CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You got to do all the other stuff too. And it'll be interesting to see, but like to know that that foundation is in place and to have seen it work at multiple levels in different spots in Baltimore and Michigan, of course. And now with the Seahawks hiring Jay Harbaugh as the special teams coach, the Macdonald streak of coaching with Harbaugh continues. So we got a little continuity there. Last thing, because I know how precious your time is and super grateful for everything you've carved out for us today. But last thing, if you could leave us with, if you were a Seahawks fan, rate your optimism level from 1 to 10 over the next few years.
We talking like 3-year window?
Yeah, let's say 3-year window.
3-year window. I'd say 10 being like we're going to win a Super Bowl, 1 being like Baker Mayfield's going to end up our quarterback one of these years.
Okay, sure.
I would say, or Zach Wilson. Sorry, Baker had a good year. I can't use him as the example anymore. We'll see how long that lasts. I would say 7. I'll take a 7. I could see them winning an NFC West in the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Getting to an NFC title game. I think that's the ceiling. I don't know.
That's encouraging.
Get back to me after. I need to see like 2 months of Mike Macdonald head coach.
Of course. No,
like you said, I think that's the key is like you have more on your plate now. Are you still going to be able to do like the defensive genius routine?
Yeah. Well, listen, man, Steven, this has been incredible. This is everything we were hoping for from you today. So thank you very much. You know, I could talk ball with you for the next 4 hours, but I appreciate the hour you've given us.
Thanks for having me. Anytime, guys.
Yeah, of course. Last thing before you get out of here, where can the folks listening find more of you and your stuff?
The Ringer NFL show, Dual Threat with Nora Princiati. Also the quarterback rankings, although I've been using this joke for like the last month. Don't look at the quarterback rankings. I don't want to hear your opinion on it. I don't want anyone to click on it. That's just a personal project for me.
Wait a week, then click on his quarterback rankings.
Yeah. They look real weird right now. We have injuries and like, I don't know. They're weird right now, but they'll be fixed.
All right, y'all. That's going to do it for today. As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter at Jackson Bevins. That's JACSON. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts and find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. This episode is brought to you by Westland Distillery in Seattle, which is my favorite local whiskey maker. If you're watching on YouTube, you've seen me enjoying a glass of the Garyana No. 8. I finally broke it open to celebrate the end of a wonderful season. And the reason it's a big deal is because this exact release was just named the No. 3 whiskey in the world by Whiskey Advocate. Westland is an American single malt whiskey distillery in the Soto neighborhood of Seattle. Their tasting room and bar are open to the public, where they serve whiskey flights, cocktails, and small plates. There's a bottle shop on site featuring distillery, exclusive releases, and more, located at 2931 First Avenue, a little over a mile south of Lumen Field. Needless to say, I'm stoked to be working with them, and one of the reasons I love their whiskey so much is that they're excellent pairings with a good cigar. And speaking of, we do have our own special release of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. Until now, you've been able to order your own bundle of 10 for just $169, which is less than half of what this blend sells for in cigars on the open market. But because of the success of the Cigar Thoughts release, we lowered the price to just $149, and we've decided to keep it there. That's right, only $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thoughts cigars, which you can order directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year aged premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and we'll send you the details directly. And the cigars, they come with a Bovita humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh whether you have a humidor or not. Of course, you can listen to this show and read every article at fieldgoals.com. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of the show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it's an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.